Hello everyone, it's February 10th here in the Valley of the Heat Stroke, and you know what that means. That's right, it's the first full week of pitchers and catchers for Spring Training 2014. Now right off the bat, I have to explain why this video footage displays 2012 in the background, and the answer for that is quite simple. Last year, I decided I would no longer purchase consoles for my gaming experience, due in large part to having such a powerful PC for work tasks. I just couldn't justify gaming on consoles anymore because my experience on the PC was just so much greater in regard to visual appeal and frame rates, etc., as well as a lack of console exclusive titles, by and large. Now, having said that, I'll point out that the game I'm using to provide simulation is one of those exclusive titles. However, last year when I checked out the 2013 version, I decided it just wasn't enough of a difference from the previous year's version, so I didn't purchase that one. But now here we are with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One being released, and it's time to make that decision again. Frankly, I still don't think either console is going to perform as well as the PC system I'm running. But again, I find myself with the dilemma of whether or not to invest in one because of title exclusiveness. A decision made easier by the fact that the 2K series has been discontinued. There is another title coming from the makers of The Show, MLB The Show, but that's not scheduled for release until April 1st, and mental note, that's April Fool's Day, so that might not be an accurate report either. In any event, in order to prepare for this season, starting now as the players report, I decided to use the simulator I had on hand to present these video reports, and I'll cross the console decision bridge in April should I find it necessary. So now, without further ado, let's talk Arizona Diamondbacks baseball.
I'm going to start this year by introducing you to Patrick Corbin. At the beginning of last season, I was just going to keep my eye on him, and Miley actually, to see how well they could perform in the rotation, just to kind of keep the Snakes from losing ground, under the presumption that Cahill and the now departed Kennedy would account for about 40 victories, without regard to wins and decisions, but the win doesn't really mean as much as it used to. Anyways, as the season progressed and I found myself down at the ballpark afternoon games more often, I began to notice how calmly they were both performing, Corbin and Miley. This year I hope and expect them both to achieve greater success, ideally by pitching in their groove and not by overexerting themselves in order to prove something, Sometimes pitchers begin throwing harder instead of smarter, and hitters draw more walks just by waiting on whatever pitch they happen to be looking for because the ball is flying all over the place rather than coming in on spot. But I don't think this will happen with Corbin. For the statistically minded, Corbin worked his rotation last year for 32 starts, despite not being considered one of the top 2 by some. He certainly quieted those skeptics by mid-June, though, because maybe mid-June, maybe at the latest July, probably June, though, as he routinely guided the Diamondbacks to victories. By the year's end, it was more apparent that the team probably cost him more wins than losses he may have given up on them. But that's all numbers talk. In the end, people have bad days, but I look for his record to improve from 14-8. His ERA last year comes in at 3.41, with his worst month coming in August at about 5.13. However, this was when that lack of support I was talking about earlier was going on pretty heavily. His season whip was around 1.2. Let me check here. Exactly 1.17 exactly, and 178 strikeouts. I hope to see him break 200 this year and maybe get his win total up to 17 or 18 because the team in general has improved and I expect him to improve. Of course, so of the other teams, we'll see what happens, but I'd like to see that. He throws southpaw style about 3/4. His fastball measures in at high 80s and 90s, mid 90s sometimes, and I think I saw it track at 97 down at the ballpark once, but that could be radar gun fluff. For the fans, don't quote me on that memory. It could have been higher or lower for all I know. But if I was right on the money, then hooray for me. I think he'll mix in mid-80 slider sometimes too, but his bread and butter seems to be location pitching with those fastballs. He has a 2-seamer and 4-seamer, I believe. He does have a curveball in his arsenal, but I barely witnessed it as often as I saw his changeup, which he also doesn't use quite that often. When he does throw his changeup, he really pulls the string on it. It's about a foot or 2 out of his hand, and all of a sudden, it's coming in slower than the actual velocity of his arm, it seems like, which, physics be darned. But that's what it looks like. Or maybe it's just you're so used to watching the ball track left to right so fast, and all of a sudden it just stops. Moving forward, defensively, what I saw in person down at the ballpark was a general readiness to defend the middle, and a definitive readiness when the situation warranted it. For example, drag bunts, etc. He was off the mound quickly on drag bunts, or choppers, left or right, or even right up the middle especially. He covered first well on hits to the right, and he had a really strong presence of mind to not get in the way when it wasn't his play to make on the ball. Finally, he didn't seem to struggle with division rivals Los Angeles. In fact, he played quite well against them. He wasn't afraid to throw the ball where it needed to go in the strike zone in order to get the outs, if you understand what I mean. He wasn't going to walk them intentionally, that's for darn sure. Nor did he seem fazed by going against some of the premium pitchers, trusting in the team to pull some runs. So it was fantastic to watch him down in the ballpark. He should certainly contribute to a division title. This year, possibly. They were off to a great start if it weren't for the Dodgers having that unrealistic month and a half. How many games straight did they win? Holy cow. But yeah, I'd like to see him win a title this year. A division title is possible. It's certainly possible, and I would say more probable than improbable. And possibly in the next year, this year, who knows, next 2 or 3, there's probably a window for a championship too, depending on who's streaking at what time across all the divisions. So that's why I'm going to keep my eye on Patrick Corbin more closely this year and hope for the best. Next up, I'd like to talk a little about Wade Miley. The first thing you need to know about this guy is that he loves photobombing selfies down at the ballpark. I see him jump behind cameras all the time. He's a fun guy to watch play and seems to be enjoying himself, so that's a good thing, I think. Now, that's not to say he isn't serious when he works, just that he's still got that love of the game vibe going on. 2 years ago, he had a great sophomore year, climbing his record up to about 16-11, yes, and his ERA was 3.33. Looked to be poised to challenge for possibly the number 2 spot in the rotation last year because of some inconsistencies at the 1-2 position, but settled in the 3rd spot by and large, I'll say. Last year, going 10 for 10 over 33 starts. He struggled a little early in May. His ERA climbed up over 7, and he gave up an unusual number of walks in both April and July. But, bar trivia of the week, he became the second Diamondbacks lefty with double-digit wins in back-to-back seasons, behind Randy Johnson. I feel he could have just as easily gotten another few wins under his belt, vis-a-vis the lack of support at one point in the season, and I hope to see him do much better this year. The thing I'd say about Miley is that when he's on, he performs very well. And even when he's off, opposing hitters, it just seems to be fighting off his pitches and sneaking into gaps or holes. Not really placing them where they ain't, as it were, just getting fortunate. Fortunate breaks for the opposing team, unfortunate for us. His final ERA last year comes in at 3.55, routinely going 6+ innings a game en route to his new career high of 202 2/3 inning pitched, with a whip score of 1.32. He only had 147 strikeouts last year, but he's more of a fielding pitcher anyways, keeping most of his pitches down in the zone and inducing a lot of ground outs and double plays when needed. In his pitching arsenal, I believe he has a fastball that tracks in the mid-90s, routinely. You could look up at 94, 95, 93, 95, 94. He also has a 2-seamer that comes in a little bit lower, hovers in just a little under 90. Touches 90 sometimes, but it's a different look. And slightly slower, but it doesn't matter because it looks smaller coming in 2-seamer. He has a slider that he uses sometimes, that he uses it across the bottom of the plate. And he also has a curveball that seems to drop real hard from the 11 to 4 o'clock position, if you're looking at a clock. It just zoop, and on the back end, the last third of the ball's trajectory is when it drops really hard, from the 11 to the 4. From looking on television, from the field itself, I'm typically on the left field side, at or around the dugout watching the game. So to me, it just looks like it's dropping hard. Of course, I might be misidentifying each of these pitches as they look pretty similar to me, the slider and the curveball, and he might use them less frequently than I think I see it. I just can't tell. I'm not there behind him watching. Miley also uses his off-speed pitch with diligent placement at variable times throughout the game. Frankly, I never really see it coming, which the pace he sets throughout the game, it's just kind of all of a sudden you see a pitch that doesn't appear to be moving. And boy, have I seen some frustrated batters way out in front of it. It's a nice pitch. When he throws it, he usually throws it for a strike, and he usually catches some leaning or not even anticipating it. Defensively, Miley hustles to cover first on grounders to the right. He's generally prepared after a one-step follow-through, where he falls off to the right slightly, but he's definitively prepared when the situation calls for it, i.e. the drag bunt situation, sack bunt situation, etc. He's not afraid to run to tertiary positions either, like covering third or home with a runner on first and a base hit occurs. He gets there right away. I look forward to seeing how Miley, and Corbin for that matter, perform during spring training as the team prepares for the league season opener in Sydney. They got to start a little early, March 22nd, I believe. They're opening up in Sydney for the entire league. Then they'll come back and start their regular season part 2. But we'll get to that when we get to that. Maybe with some guidance from the new pitching coach, Mike Harkey, formerly of the Cubs as a player and via the American League New York team as a coach. We don't discuss that team here. It's an American League team. Hopefully with that and a little friendly rivalry between themselves and the other pitchers, these two will help the team to an above 500 year and perhaps go after a division title.